What's up, everybody? This is George C.O.C. Samuels here, aka the Bitcoin Preacher, Bitcoin Cash, here with Roger Ver, aka Bitcoin Jesus. So we got the Preacher and Jesus here today, a match made in heaven. Now, Roger needs no introduction, but if you are new to the space, Roger has been involved with Bitcoin for the past 7 years. Has it been 7 years now? Yeah, a long time.
It'll be 7 years, right about any day now. It's 7 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, OG, who was one of the first people to invest significantly into Bitcoin. He's a successful entrepreneur, the founder of Bitcoin.com, and is also a well-known Bitcoin Cash advocate. And we'll go into why that is for those of you who are new to the space. But Roger, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George.
Now, to get us started, Bitcoin Jesus. This is a good one to. So I know. But where did that come from? Why has it stuck? And do you sometimes wish it wasn't your nickname?
So I'll answer the last question first. I would prefer that was not my nickname. Things definitely did not work out very well for the original Jesus.
Yes.
Eventually, he was murdered by the government of his day.
Oof.
I would prefer not to meet the same fate.
Yeah.
I think the nickname came because back in the early days, there weren't too many people at all telling people about Bitcoin, whereas I was so excited about this. I knew it was, fundamentally a world-changing technology, world-changing technology for the better.
Yeah.
Some world-changing technologies are for the worse, but Bitcoin is definitely one of those ones that's for the better.
Yeah.
So I wanted to tell everybody about it as quickly as I possibly could, and anybody I could get to listen. And I think the first time I remember somebody saying it to me, I was at a barbecue at a Bitcoin startup that I had invested in, founder's home.
Yeah.
And there were a whole bunch of high school kids from the house next door that came over to see what we were all up to. Mm. And I was telling all these high school kids all about Bitcoin and explaining to them how it works. And, they're young, digital money, that doesn't seem like it's too weird for them. So they were very interested about it and very excited about it. And I had maybe a dozen of them around me, and I was sitting each of them up with a Bitcoin wallet and sending them each $1 worth of Bitcoin. And one of the adults looking on, and the kids were all so excited about it. One of the adults looking on said, "Roger, it's like you're a Bitcoin Jesus, and you have all your disciples around you," because all the kids were saying, "I'm going to tell my friends, I'm going to go buy some tomorrow."
Yep.
And they were all excited about it. So I think that's where it started.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like, especially at, in this point in time, do you ever fear for your life? There's obviously a lot of controversy, a lot of people who love to hate you online, but in the same breath, you've been in this space for a long time. You've helped get Bitcoin to where it is today in terms of spreading the word. Have you ever feared for your life at all?
I've had a couple of crazy people send death threats, but not because they were mad about anything with Bitcoin. They were just saying, send me money, or I'm going to hurt you and your family, or poison them, or do horrible things like that.
Yeah.
So rather than pay them anything, I actually put a bounty out for leading information that leads to their arrest.
Wow.
And some of those bounties are pretty significant at this point. I guess the biggest fear I have is from government and people that want to use violence against other people. And that's I saw the SEC today was saying that you better not issue do an ICO without our permission, or we're going to hurt you, is essentially what they're saying. And to me, that's crazy. If someone wants to make a risky investment, it's their money to make their risky investment with.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't need the permission from somebody else, like the SEC or anybody else. And for me, that's what Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are all about, is enabling the individual to have 100% complete control over their own money and not need the permission from somebody like SEC or anybody else, for that matter, to send and receive money with anybody else. And guess what? Risky investments, lots of times you'll lose your money, but people buy lottery tickets every day too. You're almost guaranteed to lose your money buying lottery tickets, but it's at the end of the day, it's your money, and you should be able to spend or gamble or invest it any way that you see fit. And you shouldn't need the permission from some politicians living in some far off city that know basically nothing about you or your own life. Yeah,
exactly. And now the goal for this particular interview is we really wanted to get more behind you as a human being, because I think a lot of people, especially in the crypto and Bitcoin community, tend to forget that there are human beings on the other side of these accounts, right? So the questions for this particular interview is all around just helping people to understand a little bit more about you as a human being. So don't worry too much about the technical questions, as we've seen in other interviews. It'll be geared around that. Now, for people who are new to the space, of course, Bitcoin Core BTC versus Bitcoin Cash BCH. In a nutshell, what's the main difference? Why does it matter?
So if you want to, I guess, understand the difference, the best place to start is the Bitcoin white paper. So if you go and read the Bitcoin white paper that's titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, that's what Bitcoin Cash is today. It's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. BTC used to be that, but a bunch of developers managed to get involved and kick out everybody who disagreed with them from the project. And they've been, hot wiring Bitcoin Core BTC to become a settlement layer rather than a peer-to-peer cash system. And if you want to build a settlement layer, that's fine. Go ahead. I wish you the best of luck. I just wish that they hadn't managed to divide the Bitcoin ecosystem and engage in all sorts of censorship and personal attacks and just all sorts of craziness that should be the exact opposite thing of what we should be supporting as Bitcoiners or cryptocurrency enthusiasts. For me, it's all about freedom to engage in commerce with your own money. And for me, spending money is a form of speech. Yet these people that support, and I shouldn't generalize that it's all of them, but a huge percentage of them have been engaging in massive censorship campaigns. They've been accusing me of paying for online media manipulation. I've never done anything of the sort whatsoever. And yet there very clearly seems to be somebody that's been attacking Bitcoin Cash constantly from accounts that don't even seem to be human. So it's possible, although I think it's unlikely that that's Bitcoin Cash supporters paying for that to be done as a false flag attack. But I think that's much, much, much less likely than that it's actually somebody who just doesn't want people to have peer-to-peer money that can't be controlled by anybody. This whole SegWit thing, the entire purpose of SegWit was so that there wouldn't be a hard fork and split the community. Yet SegWit was rammed down the community's throat using censorship and personal attacks and all sorts of craziness. And it had the exact effect of what they were claiming the entire point of it was to prevent. They didn't want any sort of hard fork or splitting of the community. Instead, now Bitcoin is splintered into a dozen different versions of Bitcoin. And the community is fractured not only into different versions of Bitcoin, a bunch of the community left for all sorts of different altcoins. All of these altcoins were initially intended to be built on top of Bitcoin, and we could have done all this on Bitcoin. But these people, at the end of the day, are basically economic central planners. They think they know the right amount of block space to produce. And rather than just saying the market can decide what the right amount of block space to produce is, they want to centrally plan those things. And you look all over the world, anytime governments centrally plan anything, you have a poor quality product at a price that's higher than it otherwise would have been. And that's exactly what we saw with Bitcoin. You have a poor user experience, and the fees are much higher than they would have needed to have been. And so instead, people are busy using things like Bitcoin Cash and a bunch of other altcoins out there as well.
It's a good segue into the next question that I was going to ask around sort of holistic thinking. One thing I've noticed personally is that I find a lot of the influencers and the folks in the Bitcoin Cash space, they tend to think holistically, not just from a developer-led narrative, but from a business mindset, economic, and how has that influenced, I guess, the debates around BCH and BTC? Because in my opinion, it seems like the BTC side is very much a developer-led narrative, and from what I know about developers, they're very good at handling complexity, but sometimes the solutions end up being unnecessarily complex as well. We hear Craig Wright talk a lot about like Bitcoin, being very simple in terms of the network, etc. How has that influenced the types of debates that you've had with folks?
I think I'd kind of reject that premise that Bitcoin Core is all the developers. There's a whole bunch of developers that are fans of Bitcoin Cash. Craig Wright, of course, Gavin Andreessen, Jeff Garzik, Amaury, how do you say his last name, of Bitcoin Cash as well. The one thing that I have noticed, though, is it seems, if I were to make a generalization, the Bitcoin Core supporters don't seem to actually use Bitcoin as payment. They don't seem to have Bitcoin wallets on their phone. They don't seem to buy and sell things for Bitcoin. They don't seem to actually use it for anything other than, quote unquote, a store of value. And a lot of them don't even have much, value to store in that. Whereas Bitcoin Cash supporters, these are people that are trying to use Bitcoin in commerce every single day. That's why we see the Coinbases and the blockchain.infos and the BitPays of the world, and people that are actually using Bitcoin in commerce to enable people all over the world to be able to engage with each other financially. These are the biggest Bitcoin Cash supporters because they know that it's supposed to be peer-to-peer money. And Bitcoin Core today is not. Bitcoin Cash is. So that's why I'm a fan of Bitcoin Cash. I don't wish any ill will to Bitcoin Core. I wish they hadn't divided the network and engaged in all sorts of censorship. But at the end of the day, maybe their plan will work, but it's untested. And talk about an incredibly reckless thing to do is to risk and pivot the biggest, most popular cryptocurrency in the entire world from a path that we knew had been working incredibly well to provide people all over the world with fast, almost free payments. And they've destroyed that in the hopes of creating something that maybe that something they create will work well, but we don't know yet. So why on earth would you destroy something that was working incredibly well and take that giant risk and talk about an incredibly reckless thing to do? And we've seen the results of that. Bitcoin's market share from before the split of Bitcoin into Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash went from like 95% market share down to around 30% market share today. And not only that, if you take a step back and look at the big picture, there were all sorts of businesses with hundreds of millions of users that were looking into integrating Bitcoin into their platform. But when they did the math with the 1 megabyte block size, they realized there was no way they could onboard all their users. It would overload the network. And then eventually, just through natural organic growth, without these 100 million user plus companies coming on board, we still overwhelmed the network. And then the fees rose to be sky high. To like at one point, it was $50 was the average fee on the network. I've paid thousands of dollars per transaction many, many, many times, because anybody who's running a business, you receive lots of little payments from your customers, then you send out bigger payments to your suppliers. So if you have the way the Bitcoin transactions work is for every single input you have into your payment, you're paying the fee based on that. So if I receive payments from 100 customers and they want to pay one supplier, the fee could be, $5,000 for that. And I've paid several $1,000s for single Bitcoin transactions before. Guess what? When you're paying $1,000+ for a single transaction, you're going to look for alternatives. And that's what all the businesses in the Bitcoin ecosystem have done. And it didn't need to be that way. But they managed to do that through censorship. Anybody that's not aware of the censorship, go on Google and Google, Bitcoin censorship, and your jaw will drop when you see not only censorship, but just plain like deleting posts to make it look like people meant the exact opposite of what they actually meant. It's just absolutely insane that people would engage in this. And then pretty clearly somebody's been paying for all sorts of attacks on anybody that opposes their narrative. So there's been paid people on the internet to attack these sorts of things. That's not how I do things in my own world. And,
there's been a lot of conversations around how, sort of like the original, not enemy, but the original game that we were playing in the Bitcoin space was kind of against, Visa, MasterCard. Do you feel like now with the hundreds or thousands of altcoins that are out now, it's become a distraction for, like the original game that we were playing?
So my original intent with getting involved in Bitcoin was to spread adoption as far and wide as quickly as we possibly could. So everybody would be using Bitcoin or cryptocurrency as money. And you wouldn't really even need anything else at this point. People would just be using the cryptocurrency on chain right there at the base layer. And I think that was the original intent of Satoshi Nakamoto as well. And just about everybody else that got involved back when I was originally. We've lost that first mover advantage now. Now governments are really paying attention. And I think the adoption rate of Bitcoin was delayed by years. And hundreds of millions, if not 1 billion plus users that would have been using cryptocurrencies already aren't, because of the infighting within the community and the stuff that happened. And so that's really frustrating. And we see, the SEC is the latest, government entity that's really going crazy about things, but all sorts of other government entities are going crazy, because if you had a magic money printing machine in your basement and you could print as many dollars as you want at any time for any reason to spend on whatever you want, and suddenly somebody was devising a system where people wouldn't need to use your dollars anymore, you might not be so happy about that. And I think that's part of what's happening with governments. Governments have loved having a monopoly on the ability to print money, and then they spend it on whatever the heck it is that they want. Oftentimes it's they spend it on dropping bombs on people in other countries. Suddenly now there's this tool that takes all that power away from them. You better believe that they're not happy about that power being taken away from them. But we need to move as quickly as we possibly can to take that power away from them, because it's used time and time and time again. It's used for evil around the world. And if you want to limit the amount of evil that evil people are able to do around the world, we need to strip away their power. And at the end of the day, evil people often are the ones that rise to be the heads of states and to drop bombs on people and kill people all around the world. Well, let's take away their power to do such things. Cryptocurrency is the best tool the world has ever had to do that. That's why I'm involved. That's why I'm here. I'm in the Caribbean. I could be spending all day, relaxing on the beach, sipping a martini, but no, instead I'm in the office here working hard every single day to give people the tool to have complete control over their own lives, because I don't think that people need to be bossed around by people in some far-off city that they've never met and know nothing about.
Yeah. And speaking of regulations, have you been hearing about the controversy surrounding Tether and Bitfinex at all?
I have been hearing a bit about it, although who knows? If you don't, in my book, for the most part, if you don't like Tether, don't use it.
Yes. Exactly.
My advice from day one in regards to Bitcoin stuff or cryptocurrencies: hold the money in your own wallet that you control. Don't use a Bitcoin bank. Use a real Bitcoin wallet in which you control the private keys. If you don't have the private keys to spend your funds, you don't have your funds. You've entrusted them with somebody else. And cryptocurrencies make it so you don't need to trust anybody else. Hold the money yourself. So get a Bitcoin.com wallet, get a Trezor, get a Ledger wallet, get a Copay wallet, a blockchain.info wallet. Any of these are real wallets. Coinbase is a fantastic company. They make it super easy to buy and sell Bitcoin. Same with Zappo and a bunch of these other Bitcoin exchanges, but realize that they're Bitcoin banks. They're not Bitcoin wallets, and there's a very, very important difference.
Yeah, that's an important note to make. My startup friends were asking about your pitch. They noticed that in your interviews that you have a very consistent pitch when it comes to Bitcoin, and you've held that for the last 7 years. Where did you first learn how to pitch properly, if you did learn from anyone or anywhere? And why does consistent messaging matter when you're trying to spread the word about something? What could others learn from it?
So for people that have already, seen some of my other videos or met me before, you do notice that you're hearing the same thing over and over and over again. But the reason I'm repeating those things over and over and over again is because they're incredibly important points. And because every single time I do another interview, lots of new people hear those points for the very first time that hadn't heard it previously. So if you've heard them before, I'm sorry for repeating. But it's for the people that haven't heard those points before. Correct. And it's important to point out that Bitcoin never had any sort of scaling problem whatsoever. An artificial problem was created by these small block advocates and Blockstream supporters. They created a problem intentionally, and then they said, oh, look, we have the solution to the problem that they've created. So one of my favorite thinkers or people that influenced me in the past was a man named Harry Brown, who was an investment advisor and also the Libertarian Party presidential candidate in 1996, I believe. And he said government is like somebody who breaks your legs and then hands you a pair of crutches and says, see, if it wasn't for the government, you wouldn't be able to walk. And that's exactly what happened to Bitcoin. These people came in and broke Bitcoin's ability to be used as a worldwide payment network, and then came in and said, look, we have a solution to fix that problem. If it wasn't for us, Bitcoin wouldn't be able to be usable. And no, they intentionally damaged it. And I hear other people saying time and time again that on-chain scaling, just raising the block size from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes or 8 megabytes, that's not a long-term solution. But no, they're absolutely wrong. Yeah. There's this thing called Moore's Law, which means that on every 18 months on average, the price and speed and capacity of computing stuff drops in half, or for the same dollar amount, doubles in capacity or speed or throughput. Yeah. So it is a long-term solution. You can double every 18 months. It doesn't take too many doublings before the entire world is able to be on this network. And, I got involved in Bitcoin in 2011. Bitcoin came out in 2009. We're in 2018, and we still have the same 1 megabyte block size cap. And initially, when that 1 megabyte limit was put in place, the blocks were maybe 5 kilobytes or something like that. So we were looking at, 200 times the actual block size. So if now the blocks are 1 megabyte, that means we could make the blocks 200 megabytes today. And the difference in what the blocks actually are and the maximum block size would be the same as when the block size was initially put in. So anyhow, that's all kind of water under the bridge at this point. The two different visions for Bitcoin have split. There's Bitcoin Core that want it to be this peer-to-peer settlement layer where you're going to have to trust all sorts of people to run Lightning nodes for you to monitor your channels. And maybe that'll work. Maybe that'll work fantastic. I wish them the best of luck. I feel like they've stolen the Bitcoin name or usurped the Bitcoin name for a project that wasn't even remotely described in the Bitcoin white paper. But luckily we have Bitcoin Cash, which in my book is Bitcoin. It's the Bitcoin described in the Bitcoin white paper. It's the Bitcoin that people like myself got involved in. It's the version of Bitcoin that Satoshi Nakamoto was advocating. It's the version of Bitcoin that Gavin Andreessen, the person that Satoshi Nakamoto basically turned over the project to when he left, it's the version that he got involved in. It's the version that almost everybody that got involved in the early days was involved in. That's why you see all these people that were involved in Bitcoin in the early days are supporting Bitcoin Cash. Another great example of that is the Twitter ID at Bitcoin. I know who it is. He doesn't want to be attacked personally, but this is somebody who got involved in Bitcoin in 2009. He's one of the earliest Bitcoiners ever. And he supports Bitcoin Cash, right? Because he told me, Bitcoin Cash is the version of Bitcoin that he signed up for and wanted to get involved in. It's the same for me. Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. Bitcoin Core is something else, and I wish them good luck, but I don't wish them good luck when it comes to the censorship. I don't wish them good luck when it comes to the personal attacks. You should attack ideas all day long and explain why you think the ideas are wrong, but you don't need to engage in all sorts of ad hominem attacks and all sorts of social media manipulation via those ad hominem attacks. Like, I don't wish them good luck in that. I wish them good luck with their payment network, but they need to stop the censorship and stop the personal attacks. And you don't see very much of that sort of thing at all coming from the Bitcoin Cash camp for the most part, with some exceptions. And I wish those people that are engaging in personal attacks and making fun of people for things that aren't related to the actual underlying issues, I wish those people would stop. But you see a lot less of it in general, I think, from the Bitcoin Cash camp than you do from the Bitcoin Core camp.
Definitely try to focus more on the doing part, right? To work on active projects that will help increase the adoption of Bitcoin Cash. But it's one of those things too, free choice, free will. Hey, hard to stop, everyone from engaging in those type of activities. That's the dilemma sometimes. You mentioned
the internet sometimes.
That's the internet. Oh gosh, right? After a while, get sick of it. You just need to shut it off sometimes. Not read all those comments. So you mentioned libertarianism. For those who, of course, are not familiar with libertarianism, what's the basic premise of it, and how has that influenced the inception and growth of Bitcoin?
So I guess there's maybe two kind of paths to coming to libertarianism.
Yep.
Lots and lots of people, and myself included, I originally became, I was definitely not born a libertarian. I was kind of agnostic, I guess, in regards to politics and government in general, until I started picking up some economics books. And the more economics I studied, the more and more I realized that the free market is the best way to improve the lives of every single person on the planet. And free trade makes everybody better off. And anytime the government gets in the way of people engaging in, consensual activities, it makes them worse off, and it makes the world worse off as a result, and it retards the rate of economic growth of the entire world. And so the more economics I studied, the more of a libertarian I became, until finally I realized that, my God, the entire world is being held back from being as good of a place as it otherwise would have been if not for governments, getting in the way and preventing everything. The entire world would be a better place. And that applies to everything, like even minimum wage laws. And I just saw the U.S. Trump, put some 30% tariff on solar panels being imported to the United States. And you see a bunch of people, economically ignorant people, saying, yeah, this is going to create so many American jobs. This is great. Well, I guess 2 points in regards to that. Like, why should you care more about a stranger living in one part of the world than a stranger living in another part of the world? A stranger should be a stranger, no matter where they live in the world, and you should care about them equally if you've never met them. And then 2, you can't make the world more prosperous by cutting it in two. And that's exactly what you're doing when you're making it hard for goods to move from one part of the world to another part of the world. You're basically dividing the world into two pieces, and that doesn't make the world a better place. Free trade, and trading with other people make the world a better place. So by limiting the amount of trade people can engage with, you're retarding the entire world's rate of economic growth. And that's a really, really frustrating thing. And so anyhow, through studying economics, I wound up realizing that, wow, we need to get government out of the way so that entrepreneurs and businesses can help make the world a better place. The other path to come to libertarianism is you just kind of realize that you own your own body and nobody else owns your own body. And the mind that's inside of my own head, that I control, that mind controls my own body, and I can move my arms and do whatever I want with my labor, because the labor also belongs to me. So if I go out into the state of nature and find something that was previously unowned by anybody and mix my labor by, tilling the ground or digging up gold out of the ground or something from something that was previously owned, I've mixed something. my labor that I own with something that was previously unowned. And then that item that I've now mixed something that I own my labor with now becomes my property, because previously it was unowned. Now my labor has been integrated into it. Now it becomes mine. So then I can trade whatever that is with anybody else's property as well. And so to have some group of people that live in a far off city like Washington, D.C. or London or Beijing or Pyongyang tell me that I don't own my labor and I don't own my body. Well, if I don't own it, well, how do they own it? Why do they own me? There are three options. Either everybody owns themselves, everybody owns a little bit of everybody, or nobody owns anything at all. And the only one that seems consistent at all with the world we live in is that everybody owns themselves and owns their own body. So I reject, at this point, I just completely reject the idea that anybody should own anybody else, and that any politician or government person in some far-off land should have the right to tell me what I can or can't do with my own body or my own labor, or the things that I've produced with my own labor or traded peacefully with other people for. And there's a fantastic book that sums this up very, very well. It's called The Most Dangerous Superstition by Larkin Rose. And basically it just points out that this is just a giant myth. People are brainwashed from a very young age to believe that these other people have the moral, legitimate right to rule over us and boss us around. And another, example of this brainwashing is, for anybody in the United States, they refer to all the politicians in Washington, D.C. or Congress, they refer to them as our representatives. Well, what kind of representative claims the right to steal half your income and throw you in jail if you don't give them half your income, and then make all sorts of laws that you have to obey, and if you disobey, they'll throw you in jail? That's not a representative. That's a master. Yet they all tell us to call them, it's my representative in Congress. No, they're not. They're your master. And if you had truth in language, you'd be calling them your master, not your representative. But everybody's brainwashed from a very young age into thinking that they're your representative. No, think about what the definition of a representative is. It's certainly not somebody who takes half your income and bosses you around.
Yeah, far out. It just makes me think about the brainwashing, right? A lot of this thinking has been ingrained so much that it is almost tradition, right, for a lot of people to have that sort of relationship. Interestingly enough, so are you still living in Japan?
I split my time across a couple of countries around the world. So primarily in St. Kitts and Japan. Those are the two where I spend the most time.
Yeah. So it reminds me, even in places like Japan, you look at their feudal history and their samurai history, right? There was a master-servant relationship as well. Having lived in Japan now, do you see that those type of relationships still play out in the culture of Japan? Of course, it may vary from different parts, but what has been your observation in that part of the world?
There's kind of an expression in Japan that the nail sticking up gets hammered down, or something to that effect. And I think that's pretty darn true in Japanese society. Being a Japanese person born in Japan, which I'm not, obviously, but for Japanese people born in Japan, growing up there and living their whole lives, there's just an immense amount of pressure for them to conform with society. And being a foreigner living in Japan is absolutely wonderful, because you have the foreign card you can play, that you didn't know any better. You didn't have to conform because you're not Japanese. You're not from there. And so you kind of get a free pass on a lot of things. Whereas if you were a Japanese person born in Japan, there is an immense amount of pressure on conformity there. But even in the U.S. though too, I'm embarrassed today that I had these feelings. But every single day growing up as a kid, you said at least when the schools I went to, we said the Pledge of Allegiance every single morning at school. And then when I got into high school, I remember that there was one Native American girl who didn't stand for the pledge. She would just stay sitting down. And today, my viewpoint is good for her. She was the only one that was right at the school. But at the time, me and my other friends would just look at her and we just felt this anger. How dare she not stand and respect the flag and show appreciation for this thing? And we were literally really, angry inside that she didn't have this same blind worship and obedience for a stupid piece of cloth. And today I see that I should have been sitting down too and not participating in any of that. But the brainwashing is so strong that everybody except for her and the whole school was standing up. And wow, I wish I remember her name and could give her credit for it. But it must have been incredibly uncomfortable for her to be willing to just sit down and not participate in that, because the pressure on her and being a high school student, kids, there's a lot of peer pressure being a kid. So I'm sorry I don't remember her name, but I would like to congratulate her today for being strong enough to not stand up and say a pledge of allegiance to that flag. So
hope she sees this then.
I hope she sees this. Now, I wasn't, and I'm sorry. If she does see this, I'm sorry I wasn't friends with you, because I didn't know you, and I think a lot of my friends were a bit upset that you weren't standing for the flag. But I'd like to say I'm sorry. You were the one that was right, and we were wrong, and I'm sorry for that.
When was I won't say exact moment, because it might not have been an exact moment, but when did the process of unlearning take place for you? At what age? What time? What moment?
I wish I could say that there was a specific moment or epiphany. I guess I could name two that were big stepping stones, I suppose. One was when I was very young. I think I was probably still in elementary school, maybe 4th, 5th grade, maybe 6th grade, maybe junior high, but anyhow, very, very young. And on the ballot in California, where I was living at the time, there was a proposition to raise the taxes on cigarettes. And nobody in my family smoked, and they were justifying the raising of the taxes on cigarettes to pay for the schools. And they said the children are going to get more money in the schools. And I believe the school teacher was telling all the students in her class, like, go home and tell your parents to make sure they vote in favor of this, raising of cigarette taxes so that the schools get more money. And my mother is certainly not a libertarian. She's not happy with my libertarian beliefs particularly. But she planted a little bit of a seed there. I went home from school and I asked my mother, what do you think about the cigarette tax that they're talking about at school? And the teacher said that we should vote for it so the schools get more money. And my mother looked at me. She said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm going to school and I want the schools to have more money, so I'm for it. And my mother said, And I said, well, what do you think, Mom? And she said, well, I think that just because somebody wants to smoke doesn't mean that they should have to pay more money for schools that people that don't choose to smoke. Because if you want to smoke, that's your life and your life belongs to you. Or she said something to that effect. And that made me start to think, and I saw the world a little bit differently there. I thought, oh, well, why should people who want to smoke or drink or do something else have to pay more for something? Starbucks doesn't charge you more if you're a smoker than if you're not. Every other business in the world doesn't charge you more if you're a smoker than if you're not, except for maybe health insurance. But there's a good reason for that one. But I think that made me see the world a little bit differently there, even at a young age.
Paradigms. This has become almost like a recurring theme I'm noticing for a lot of people who get involved in crypto. And one person even said that, and this is tying back to what you were just talking about now, but a lot of people say that getting into crypto is like taking the red pill in the Matrix, right? It's like once, or Bitcoin, right? And once you've gone down that hole, like there is no turning back. Was that a similar case for you when you first learned about Bitcoin? Or was it just part of that natural process, as you were talking about?
No. Well, I had already read, all about online anonymous digital cash in theory from people like David Friedman, and then in like other science fiction books and that sort of thing. So I had been waiting around for online digital cash to come into existence since like the late 90s. And then when I heard about Bitcoin, I was like, yes, this is finally here. This thing that I've been waiting for that's going to empower the entire world to have more freedom. It's finally here. So like for me, I was already down that rabbit hole waiting for the rabbit hole to be opened up to the rest of the world. And then with the invention of Bitcoin, it was. Now everybody else is pouring down the rabbit hole with me, which is so fun. And there's a bunch of us, Bitcoiners down here in St. Kitts at the moment. And I was with dinner with a bunch of them last night, but I was talking to one of them who I knew is, at this point, a hardcore libertarian individualist, just like myself. And I thought he probably was, and he's been deep into Bitcoin for years and years and years now. I assumed that he was a libertarian before Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But he told me last night, no, it was because he found Bitcoin that then he found libertarianism. And he's like, the whole world just makes so much more sense now. And so I've gotten all sorts of emails and met all sorts of people like that they said it was because of Bitcoin that they found libertarianism. Whereas for me, it was because I was already a libertarian that I paid attention to Bitcoin. And I think that was true in the early days. It was all the libertarians came to Bitcoin, and now Bitcoin's bringing all sorts of new people to libertarianism. And I guess I'd like to point out that the Libertarian Party in the United States is not libertarian. It's a bunch of statists and kind of maybe like what happened with Bitcoin Core at this point. A bunch of people that didn't believe in Bitcoin managed to take over Bitcoin Core and the name and everything else and build something else. It's the same thing with the Libertarian Party in the U.S. A whole bunch of people who aren't libertarians managed to steal the name and the organization and start running people for office that aren't even remotely libertarian. So maybe there's another parallel between those two groups.
I mean, there's so many, like even throughout history, one of the analogies I use with folks, and I've heard this used a lot too, is, comparing Bitcoin to religion and Christianity and, the split between the Catholic Church and the Protestants. Is this just, something inevitable that every time, you try to get some sort of unifying vision, just naturally splits because there are people who see things differently in terms of the how and just want to split off and do their own thing?
Maybe it is a natural thing, but that's one of the things that I dislike so much about governments is they force people to be together. If you don't have the same vision or the same ideas or want to live in the same society with other people, go and form your own. Be around a bunch of like-minded people. And now, thanks to the invention of cryptocurrencies, it's easier than ever before for a bunch of people that like Bitcoin Cash will get together and use it and go for it. And if you like Bitcoin Core and they're planning for a settlement layer, go ahead and use it. And everybody should be free to participate in whatever system they want, and nobody should be forced to participate in a system that they don't want to participate in. And if Starbucks were to go around and force people to buy their coffee and say you're going to go to jail if you don't buy their coffee, people would be furious and protesting in the street against Starbucks. But when governments do the exact same thing and say, hey, you have to participate in our retirement program or we're going to send you to jail, or you have to abide by our payroll tax regulations or we're going to confiscate all your stuff and send you to jail, it's not any different than when Starbucks does it. But for some reason, people give them a free pass because they say, oh, that's the government. But I guess the best definition of a libertarian is somebody that doesn't make exceptions for groups of people. Or there's no free pass on morality. Writing down words on a piece of paper and calling it a law doesn't change something that's immoral into something that's moral. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. And working with the building in front of with a flag in front of it doesn't change an immoral act into a moral one.
Yeah. Did you see the recent, there was some government report that came out saying that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin from a technical standpoint. Did you see that roaming around Twitter recently?
I did see that going all over the interwebs yesterday. Yep. So maybe they're right sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Although it's worth pointing out that report was paid for with stolen money taken from people against their will. And at the end of the day, I don't think that that's an appropriate way to fund things. If people want something done, people will pay for it voluntarily. If people don't want something done, they shouldn't be forced to pay for it. So,
yeah. All right. Future-wise, what major trends do you see occurring for, let's say, the cryptocurrency space, and what do you predict for Bitcoin Cash 5 years from now, assuming BTC remains capped at 1 megabyte?
Assuming BTC remains capped at 1 megabyte, I don't think the future is very bright at all. In fact, I'll go out on the record right now and predict that by the end of this year, 2018, Bitcoin Core will no longer be the top cryptocurrency in terms of market cap. It's already no longer the top cryptocurrency in terms of number of transactions per day and the amount of money moved on it per day. So about the only, and there's a bunch of different metrics, but one of the few metrics that it has left is that it's still in the top spot is terms of market cap. And by the end of this year, I don't think that'll be the case at all anymore. Bitcoin Cash, I'm very optimistic on it. It has the exact same economic formula that led Bitcoin from nothing to the worldwide phenomenon that it is today. Bitcoin Core does not have that economic formula. And so we have the empirical evidence showing that it works and worked incredibly well. I think that that's likely to continue. So I think by the end of this year, a number of cryptocurrencies will probably surpass Bitcoin Core in terms of market cap and amount of money moved and number of transactions happening on the network each day. The two front runners for that, of course, are Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of other ones too that we should discount as well. Dash has a huge marketing budget each month because of the way their block reward is allocated for doing those sorts of things. Monero has incredibly strong privacy. There's a whole bunch of things out there that we should not discount. There's 1,001, maybe 10,001 different altcoins out there at this point. But I think in the coming years, we'll see a bit of a consolidation again at some point as the network effect kicks in. And I think we'll see a smaller number of currencies where the majority of the action is upon. But right now, like basically due to the censorship and the limitation of the block size and the intentional high fees, like a lot of people don't realize this, or they can't believe anybody would be so stupid as to think such a thing. But many of the Bitcoin Core supporters, including, Adam Back and Greg Maxwell and Eric Lombroso and these people, they openly say that they want Bitcoin Core to have high fees. Well, guess what? If you have two different versions of Bitcoin, one that's slow, expensive to use, and unreliable, and another that's fast, cheap, and reliable, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out which one of those two versions of Bitcoin is going to be more useful to people, and therefore which one more people are going to use. And that's obviously Bitcoin Cash. And that's why I've sold the majority of my Bitcoin Core to buy more Bitcoin Cash and have done fantastically well. Over the last 3 months, Bitcoin Cash has far, far outperformed Bitcoin Core. And that's going to continue into the future as well. There's no doubt in my mind on that. So if you're looking for investment advice, it would be to buy Bitcoin Cash and probably sell some of your Bitcoin Core to do it. I'm not optimistic on the future of Bitcoin Core, but I wish them the best of luck. I'm not out there trying to hurt them. But man, I wouldn't buy stock in a snake oil sales company, and I'm not going to put more of my money into Bitcoin Core because they have this upside down, backwards, wrong economic model for what Bitcoin Core is. It's not useful as a currency, and if it's not useful as a currency, it's not useful as a store of value. The only reason something can be used as a store of value is if it has some other secondary use case, and they've destroyed that secondary use case with Bitcoin Core. So its use case as a store of value is declining as well.
Next couple of questions are from the community. They definitely heard that I was interviewing you from the tweet that got your attention. So thanks for even agreeing to this interview from that. But first question I got here is from Jeffrey Rufino. I think we might have already answered this, but I'll ask anyways. Roger, I'm curious. Why did you choose Japan as your country and not Australia? How come you can't get back to the USA?
So first of all, I can go to the U.S. anytime I want. I have a 10-year visa. I was just in the U.S. a couple weeks ago. Had a fantastic meetup in L.A. on like 48 hours notice. Several hundred people showed up, all Bitcoin Cash supporters. It was really overwhelming for me because sometimes if you go on social media, you see all this hate for Bitcoin Cash, but you realize that there's a lot of those people I don't even think are real people. I think that they're just paid bots. And then there's some people that have been influenced by those paid bots. They see all this other, hate for Bitcoin Cash, and they think, oh, this must be the popular position. But no, I don't think it is. Hundreds of people showed up in LA. There's a video of it on YouTube. It was standing room only. So many people came, and these people were cheering and excited about Bitcoin Cash. The guy that organized it was an early Bitcoin user as well. So thank you, Josh, for organizing that. And I think it was really fun and informative for everybody that showed up there to see just how many people understand that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash is the original roadmap. Bitcoin Cash works. Bitcoin Core is something else at this point. And so why Japan and not Australia? I knew I didn't want to live in the U.S. Anymore. Wasn't quite sure where to go, but I'd had a Japanese girlfriend before, and it had been a good experience. So I figured that there were more to be had in Japan. But if I had an Australian girlfriend before, I would have wound up in Australia. It was just kind of just by chance that it ended up being Japan. But I don't regret it at all. Japan's an awesome place, and there's so many Bitcoin people happening, and so much Bitcoin activity, and so much Bitcoin Cash activity happening in Japan as well. The Japanese are pretty hip and smart to the fact that Bitcoin Cash works, Bitcoin Core doesn't.
Yeah, why is that? Because, we were talking about Japan before, about the conformist type culture. Why do you think cryptocurrencies are really surging in places like Japan, South Korea, etc.?
So I guess one other interesting thing that's happened in Japan, so almost all of the very first restaurants in all of Japan to start accepting Bitcoin back in maybe, 2012 or 2013 was probably when the first one started doing them. All of them are now accepting Bitcoin Cash, and they've stopped accepting Bitcoin Core.
Really?
And that's a really, really big sign, I think, that they're switching to Bitcoin Cash because it actually works for payments. With $50 fees, you can't use that to pay in a restaurant. And maybe you hear all this talk about the Lightning Network this and the Lightning Network that. Maybe someday it'll work, and I hope it does work someday, but it'll work better, faster, cheaper, and more reliably on top of Bitcoin Cash than it will on top of Bitcoin Core. You hear all these people saying that SegWit is a requirement for Lightning Network. No, you've been brainwashed by the propaganda. SegWit is not required for Lightning Network. Bitcoin Cash will be able to support Lightning Network even more reliably than Bitcoin Core will. So there's just so much misinformation out there where if you're not allowed to hear the truth, then you won't be able to know the truth. And that's another big problem with the censorship that's been going on in the Bitcoin Core community. Lots of people never even heard the fact that you don't need SegWit to do Lightning Network, or that the Lightning Network will work just fine on Bitcoin Cash, because they're busy censoring that information and deleting people that post that information out there. So, anyhow, if people are censoring arguments, you should really, really be wary of the position that they're advocating. If they don't want you to hear something, you should ask, well, why would they not want me to hear that? What's the problem here? What's the secret? So I think I lost track of what the original question was.
No, you already answered the original question.
I'm happy to try and answer, but
you already did. The original question was about why Japan over Australia, and how come you can't come back to the USA. So you're good. But it's a good one, a good segue anyways into the next question.
And that's actually another bit of fake news. I hear all these people say all the time, oh, he's banned from the US. No, I'm not. I was just there a couple of weeks ago, and I can go anytime I want. I have a 10-year visa that's good for another, 9 or 8.5 years, and then I can renew it after that for another 10 years. So stop spreading the fake news and the lies. I can go to the US anytime I want.
Yep. And that's why it's always good. I always like to confirm directly from the source, because a lot of people seem to love bringing up conspiracy theories from second or third sources. And, they just continue to believe it. Even if you present them directly from the source, it's like, this is what is actually said. They'll be like, nope, doesn't support my narrative. But yeah,
which makes me wonder if some of those people are just people paid to push false narratives. So there seems to be quite a bit of false narratives being pushed about me. Well, I hear them say, it started all of a sudden overnight. They said, "Oh, Roger, you're mentally ill. You need to get help." I'm not mentally ill. I'm just fine. I'm completely sane. But all of a sudden, you saw overnight all these people saying that on social media, and it seemed to be like a real deliberate thing. Yeah. And there are a couple other narratives that I've seen them like trying to push against me, and it all of a sudden turns on overnight where there's a bunch of accounts pushing the same narrative, and
it seems really
orchestrated to me.
It's really unfortunate. And I think the other thing too is that you do have people who it would go back to the paradigms again, like depending on what your belief is and how you see the world, there'll be certain narratives that will align with that, and then you end up supporting it. And that's what I've noticed too, whether they're bots or not. I mean, I know real people who do support those narratives too, and it's just, the network effect, it just spreads like wildfire. Fortunately,
I guess if I could also point out that that being factually correct and speaking the truth is far, far, far more important than being popular. So myself, and I think lots of other people in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem, we're not here to be popular. We're just here to spread the truth and work on something that actually does work and is useful for people to use around the world. Mm-hmm. Whereas at this point, the honest truth of the matter is that the Lightning Network is just a bunch of vaporware. It's not. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll come together. But it's not there yet. There's no merchants that are accepting it for payments. They did a little proof of concept on the Blockstream website, but even on the website, there's a big giant warning saying, be really careful when you use this. You might lose money. Financial systems are the software that needs to be the most reliable and the most secure so that people don't lose money. So the Lightning Network's nowhere even remotely near ready for prime time at this point. And that's not to say that it never will be. And that's not to say that I hate the Lightning Network. I wish them good luck, but it sure isn't ready today. And so they destroyed a system that was working incredibly well for payments in the hopes that maybe the Lightning Network someday will possibly be usable for payments. So that's an absolutely retarded business practice to destroy your product that works today in the hopes that you might have something tomorrow. That's any businessman knows not to do that.
Yeah. The next question we might have answered already, so I'm gonna ask it anyways, and you let me know whether we have answered it or not, or if you want to expand on it. BTC is slow and fees are expensive. However, atomic swaps and Lightning is making everything instant and free. What will be BCH's main advantage then?
BCH is already instant and basically free. So it has that right now today. Yep. Maybe all the atomic swaps and Lightning Network, maybe that'll all work out, but that's years away. I don't think it's months away. I think it's years away. And life is short. I was just telling there are some other people that have been helping the Bitcoin.com team that are about half my age. And I told them that, well, at my age, I'm twice your age. My life is, with the average normal human lifespan, without some exciting technology that's coming down the line, with traditional human lifespans, my life is about half over already. And boy, did it ever go fast. And I'm halfway through. That's a scary thought. And I told those kids who are, about, coming up on 20, I said, your life is about a quarter of the way over. Think about how fast that went. We need to move quickly. We need to do things sooner rather than later. And that's how I see it when it comes to Lightning Network and atomic swaps. Maybe they'll be working in a decade from now. Great. I hope they're working in 10 days from now.
Yeah.
But they're not. And right now we have a system that works right now today, and that's Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash is the exact same version of Bitcoin. It works the exact same way as just a couple of months ago on the Bitcoin network. And that's what led Bitcoin to be this worldwide phenomenon that it is today. So the question is, what about atomic swaps and Lightning Network making everything fast, instant, and free? Bitcoin Cash already is basically all those things. So just use Bitcoin Cash right now today.
Yep, perfect answer. Next one's from Bitcoin Tramp. I'm unsure about the man's swag. He seems to wear only the same brown suit, a t-shirt, and always Nike Air Max, black. Where the hell does this swag come from? Where does your swag come from?
So I'm not sure about brown suits. I don't think I have any brown suits. I have a couple of gray suits. I like the Nike Air Max. Yeah, I like Nike Air Max shoes because they're really comfortable.
Yep.
And I bought dress shoes in the past, but they're uncomfortable. And everybody just expects you to wear dress shoes because that's like the societal pressure and conformity that you have there. But my Nike Air Maxes are more comfortable, so I wear those, and I don't care. I don't have anything to prove to anybody about what type of shoes I wear. I can wear whatever type of shoes I want, and I like the Nike Air Maxes because they're comfortable. So, I used to wear Bitcoin shirts all the time, anywhere in public, all day, every day. But now I think Bitcoin has enough brand awareness where I don't need to do that, and I'd like to have a little more privacy in my life. So I don't really wear Bitcoin shirts in public too often anymore, unless I'm going to like a Bitcoin conference or something like that. But not just around town and generally anymore.
Yep. Next question. I'd like to know a little bit more about Roger's Jujitsu background. Are you a UFC fan?
Of course, I'm a UFC fan, and that's how I got into Jujitsu. So I remember when I was a kid watching, UFC 1, 2, 3, and watching Royce Gracie just roll through everybody, and it wasn't even a fair fight for the people that didn't know any Jujitsu. So then I did wrestling in junior high and high school, and then I got into my late 20s and was having a little bit too much fun in Tokyo, I guess, and not exercising enough, and started to gain a little bit of weight. So I needed some exercise to do. And of course, it was going to be Jiu-Jitsu. So I started my path down Jiu-Jitsu, and I thought I would be okay right off the bat because of my wrestling background. But oh my God, you have no idea what's dangerous and what's not. And sorry if this is boring for people that don't do Jiu-Jitsu, but what an addicting, fun sport for anybody. If you haven't tried it, go and give it a try. It's fun. And here I am, like quite a few years later, almost a decade later, and I'm a Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. I've competed in a bunch of tournaments all over the world.
Nice. And
for people that don't know about Jiu-Jitsu, you'll think, well, you're only a brown belt and you've been doing it for about a decade. My kid brother got his black belt in karate, and it took him 18 months or something like that. Jiu-Jitsu is no joke. Go in there and give it a try, and you'll see just how hard it is. So it's a really fun sport, and I love it. And unfortunately, I'm waiting for my knee to heal at the moment. But once my knee is healed up, I can't wait to get back on the mat.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite UFC fighter? Or any notable? Any notable?
Yeah, I think my favorite MMA fighter, who is a little bit old now, but Kazushi Sakuraba was just an amazing fighter. For anybody that remembers him from the Pride days, was just an incredible grappler and mixed martial artist, and never a boring moment with Kazushi Sakuraba. So if I had to pick one, I think it would be Kazushi Sakuraba.
Nice. All right, final two questions. If you could be any animal in the world, what would you be and why? Have you ever been asked this one?
I've never been asked that question before.
Bam.
Any animal. I'd choose the honey badger because it just doesn't really have too much to worry about. So I would like to be like that, but in reality, I think the world is a dangerous place. So I need to be a bit more careful than the honey badger seems to be. But I guess that's a fun one.
Yeah, you're the first person to answer with a honey badger, so awesome work.
The porcupine's not a bad one either. It leaves everybody alone, but don't mess with it also.
Oh, yes. Oh, definitely. So last question. If there was one piece of advice you'd give to someone getting into cryptocurrencies for the first time, what would it be?
Think for yourself. Of course, think for yourself.
Yes.
Look at the evidence, look at the reasoning, think for yourself. Is what this person that you're seeing on this YouTube video or on some blog you're reading, is what they're saying make sense? Don't just believe them because they have a big following, or don't just believe them because they wear fancy shoes and a fancy suit. Think for yourself. Are the things that they're saying, do they make sense? And if they don't make sense, then don't believe them.
Gosh, such simple advice that I see so many people ignore, right? Last month, I think I saw the most number of new people enter the crypto space because of everything just going up, right? Folks were asking others, including myself, hey, can you handle my money for me? Can you do it for me? And I just kept telling them, no, you need to take the red pill. You need to go through the process of initiation into this space. You need to learn what's going on, because that same mentality of just handle my money for me without knowing the basics is what gets a lot of people into trouble too. Perfect advice. Okay, Roger. Well, that is all from my end. Thank you so much for your time today. You will be at the Satoshi conference, I believe. Is that correct?
The one in Tokyo coming up later this year, or which one? Yeah,
yes,
absolutely. I'll be there.
Yes, you'll be speaking. Yeah. I do believe. I saw you there. So I will be seeing you there as well. So it'll be nice to meet you in person. And all the best. Hope you get good sleep and rest. I will see you soon.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Roger.